Hello there, and welcome to my feedback going over everything about leagues, since there is over 20 things wrong with this. And first off, this would be a bit of a disclaimer, and this is because even though the game mode is supposed to run for 8 weeks, however, players are actually supposed to be done with the content within 3 or 4 weeks into it. Afterwards, then you're able to just go back into the main game and relax. Now, for players that aren't sweaty and have actually done that, usually you'll probably stop around the mid-throw tier simply because of how underwhelming it does feel. And this is, honestly, I would have to say with the release of the relics prior to actually the game mode. And this is because all of the relic powers, they're not strong enough. Now, if we do take a look at the tier 1 relics, the only option that players had was the excavator. This is simply because archaeology is the #1 worst skill because it ties so much into every single skill. For example, let's say if you actually did the animal wrangler relic, this only gives a 50% increased chance for catch rate while you are fishing. You know, this is actually pointless until you get 27 fishing for salmon and trout, and then you do this to about 55, and then you do manifest. So only from 1 to 26 fishing, this is actually where it's very impactful. And for this, players do the fishing contest quest, and they do the sea slug to skip that. This completely destroys the animal wrangler usefulness. Now, let's say for like the tier 2 relics, the 5-finger discount was pretty good of a relic choice, and this is because doing clues were too important for leagues. It was pretty much how you were able to get about 41% of league points. You had to do clues at the end game. You didn't really have to do too much end game bosses, even though there was not a bad luck mitigation, although they were looking into that, but they decided not to because there is actually a couple ways you are able to abuse that. Players like, wait a minute, how can you abuse the bad luck mitigation? This is simply because of the French chat system. When you toggle loot share, how you'll get the shard drop instead of the physical drop, which will not actually count for your collection log in a sense, since you don't really get that drop. But even though you did, players are able to then trade your partner, trade in that piece, let's say like a Torva plate body from Nex, and then thanks to the bad luck mitigation, since you didn't technically get the Torva plate body, you got the shards, you would instead get that same item. So that is one kind of downside for having bad luck mitigation, since players are easily able to bypass this. Now for the tier 3 relics, I'm going to be honest, these ones were in itself a problem, and that is because while they do sound very good, you're able to teleport everywhere. However, if you click on Assassin's Insight, you're locked out of 72% of teleports. And that's because simply of how overpowered questing is, and it unlocks pretty much all PVM upgrades, all skilling upgrades, and then teleportation around Gielinor. And this is going to be a bit of a weird one, and I really wish they would have released leagues instead of the summer beach event. This is so that players are actually able to be on to then play, instead of doing this while players were just starting university or college, or a little bit of hard time, since September and October and November are a bit of a busy season. Now, another thing they should have done was actually locking regions. Maybe like every other day they release a new religion within the game so that players were then able to explore it. And this is because once you make a new account, you have to go to every city, every location, and you have to do those little tiny bit of league points. You don't just stay in one location. You stay in pretty much everywhere for 10-15 minutes doing the low level achievements for like the 10 and 30 league points. And then honestly, I really wish that as you did progress through leagues, that the tier relics, they always gave you an XP boost, since I believe on tier 3 and 4 you were stuck on times 6 experience. They should have made tier 4 8 experience, and then tier 5 like 12 or 10 times the experience. There were A couple of reasons why, and that's for like tier 7. It's only 16 XP boost. You know, on RS3, old school leagues, players were getting, I believe it's 32 times the experience. And this made scaling so much faster so that you're able to bust out those powers for the little achievements. And then one biggest issue is honestly questing. Questing is so important on RS3 simply because you're able to unlock pretty much everything in the world. But questing takes so much time, and then you're even doing quest that is like, let's say 20 minutes long. You do this for 2,000 thieving experience. You pretty much just wasted your time, even though with leagues, even if you did this at the tier 7 relic, which is the max relic we do have, 16 times 2,000 experience, it's not worth your time to even doing that. But you actually have to do a handful of quests, and this is mainly for the extinction quest. Just doing that whole quest line, if you have all the stats, all the items needed, all the archaeology mysteries needed, which means you have to do archaeology, you have to train that, you have to get the associate, you have to pretty much restore all the artifacts, and then you're able to actually do this. It takes a total of 5 hours and 46 minutes just doing the questing alone. This is even worse because the Battle of the Monolith, it's about 29 minutes of a quest, and you know what? All you have to do is just AFK, set up the monsters for the wave, and then that's it. It is a huge AFK waste of time, pretty much like the new Foundations quest. You're building those buildings for almost 2 hours for absolutely no reason. Although, granted, they did speed up that by times 10, but that should have been ahead of time since quest is too important in the game. So I would like for them to add a way to maybe like a quest skip token of some sorts so that players do not have to waste 40 plus minutes or even hours doing quest lines that they actually have to do. Now, as a little side note, the extension questline is very important, and this is because if you're 70 runecrafting, doing the whole questline, you're able to get 100 runecrafting. This is sadly the only best realistic way of training runecrafting, simply because of how badly designed runecrafting is, since you need a lot of pure essence. Even though, yes, you are getting extra experience rates, it's just the skill itself is a little bit bad in my opinion. Although they did just recently buff this in the middle of leagues. I would have loved this to be buffed before leagues came out so that players were able to take full advantage of that. Since, I don't know, it was kind of like a nerf, but a mini nerf or a buff in some sense. Like, oh, okay, we'll release this game mode, and then 2 weeks later, they buff pretty much one of the slowest skills that is time gated in a sense, since you need a lot of pure essence. Now, for the archaeology mysteries, they should have completed every single one of them, and this is from my own personal experience. I was stuck on the Everlight, the Spirit of Hebi, even with the Excavator Relic, the Lorehound Pet. I was stuck on getting the last page for over 52 minutes. The other 2 pages I was able to get within 20 minutes. So just doing that one mystery took me almost an hour and a half, which, I mean, I could have better off done something else, but you have to do the mysteries for pretty much all your PVM. Now, a little bit of another thing to tie in with archaeology is that the gold rune material cache that requires 20 archaeology is actually locked behind the Defender of Vera questline, which is another lengthy one. Now, yes, I do understand they did this to combat the bots, but it's actually a huge nerf because bots don't really bought this archaeology material. They bought the 76 ones in Warforge. So just because they wanted to combat bots, they made main accounts even harder because you have to do that huge quest line to actually get some good insane buffs. Now, another one for that is that the clue relics. This is extremely good, and this is that we get the full Globetrotter outfit. However, there was a couple issues with that, and that is you don't actually get all your hidey holes pre-filled. You have to get all of the items yourself. So you're pretty much stuck there resetting with the backpack for that one clue up to 20 times until you're able to get a clue step that you are able to do. Now, yes, some hidey holes are very easy, and then others are a huge waste of time. And then let's say you want to keep flipping until you get a clue or NPC that does not give you a slider puzzle. This was the best way. Now, I really wish that they would have either removed the slider puzzles completely for leagues, given us all the hidey holes filled automatically so that players were then able to do freely clues, since doing clues was the best way to get league points, because it was pretty much get 5, 10, 15, 25, 50, 100, 200 uniques, clues completed, and all that stuff. Now, as for the relics, I'm gonna be honest, all these relic powers, they're very, very weak. And this is simply because the relics don't give you the experience. Woody Flash Event every single hour is by far the best possible way to train most of your gathering and artisan skills, simply because of just how overly broken they are. This one should have been disabled in my opinion, because okay, I'm one wood cutting, let me go chop trees. But no, I did the Woody Flash Event. I went from one wood cutting all the way to 49. Yep, that's right, I skipped pretty much the whole thing, and I did that Woody Flash Event. I didn't do the very first one. I only spent about 3 minutes, and then I teleported out. I was like, I can't be bothered with this. And that was by far the best way to actually train the skill, that the Woody Flash Events is better than all of the dailies. But now keep in mind, yes, there is a lot of good other dailies, but there's too many dailies that I wish they would have taken their time to remove the dailies or disable them, since players are actually able to get more experience doing dailies than playing the game. Now, I do wish they had specific items to help us, and let's say if you want to do Slayer, they should have given us like an Eternal Slayer ring, Slayer bracelets, both of them to act in one, so that players are able to take full advantage, automatically give us the Slayer full helmet, because you do actually have to do the cabin fever quest, kill cave howers, which I went over 1,000 dry. Even though, yes, we did get boosted drop rates, it did not actually boost a large amount of items, which players did feel quite frustrating. Now, there is another thing, and this would have to be the area task achievements. They gave so little amount of points, and some of them, like the Varrock Medium, where you have to catch 100 rats after you do the rat catcher quest. I was stuck on this one for 39 minutes after I had to wait 3 hours for my cat to grow from a kitten to an overgrown cat. Then I could waste my time to actually attempt to catch the 100 rats. For dungeoneering, they should have done the same thing with the experience to the tokens as well. Which, I mean, I think that could have been an easy fix in my opinion. There's always a little bit of issue with dungeoneering, and that's because you don't get physical drops. You just get one giant XP drop at the end of the dungeon, compared to, like, let's say doing elite dungeons, where you are able to kill those mini bosses for the 5,000 tokens. This is actually faster than training the skill itself, since we did not get that little bit of buff. As for the reaction time, I'm gonna be honest, old school, once they get an update on Wednesday, by the time it's Friday, they did all the hot fixes, the hot patches, and all of that before they leave for work. Well, before they leave for home from the weekend. So they're able to spend their time. For RS3 now, you know, they have always had a consistent delay of about 3 weeks up to about 8 months of fixing that little content that could take a little bit of time. And this is Warcraft. The very first week of Warcraft, once it was released, they're like, okay, we will be changing this because he does desync. Necromancy tanks a lot of damage because of Zermagal. He'll do a random volley of souls of death without any warning if your fight is over 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Everything goes crazy. We are still waiting for that little update. As for the combat relics, they're not really strong enough, although I will say the melee one is by far the best possible one, and this is simply because you get a little bit of health back, so it's like having the masterwork weapons. And let's say if you did use magic, this one actually was only about a 7% DPS increase compared to the main game having the best in slot in both game modes. This relic power was not really strong enough. I mean, leagues, I expected us to be maybe about 50% stronger, even though, yes, we do have the hit chance, which is 100%, which was amazing, so that you're able to do bosses with tier 70 weapons to get your tier 80, 90, even quicker. Now, a little bit of a little thing they could have done for the combat relics was actually separate this in its own category, and then we're able to upgrade it 3 times. Each time we get 10% more damage, 15% more damage, and then like 30 or 50% more damage, and players were able to choose either one of them or all 3. Since you're able to do it 3 times, you could have had a nice wraparound for all your skills, or you could have done like 2 for melee, 1 for necromancy. And then for the magic one, this one they should have easily been able to give us the Omni rune pouch that acted as all runes in your inventory all the time, because right now players have to do a lot of the bits so they're able to get all the magical thread. The runes weren't an issue since we had unlimited general store stock, so players were kind of like, okay, yeah, I want to go for magic, but it's only 7% increased, and I actually have to spend so much time, in fact about 4 hours per rune pouch, and you would need 4, or you want to risk bringing 17 different type of runes with you in your inventory, which, yeah, that's a bit of an issue. Now, one thing they could have done for all the combat was actually an Elder Overload at War's Retreat, gain access to all auras, all unlimited refreshes, and finally that Visvax to get 1 hour for all your, I believe it's what, Berserk, Maniacal, and Reckless. They were supposed to rework this back in 2021 when those relics were no longer supposed to be 30 minutes. They were supposed to only have 1 hour every time, which we're still waiting for that update. Now, yes, I know they did disable basically all the auras because they wanted the relic powers, but most of them aren't really too broken. I mean, sure, the greater footer is good since you're not able to fail any courses, but failing courses don't really penalize the player too much except the Head's Oasis. Now, Necromancy felt very forced on new players, but there's one issue, and that is Necromancy is tied behind a lot of quests, and you have to train your mining and smithing, crafting, and some other skills as well, since, I mean, you have to kill Hermod, which those drops were not boosted, which was another issue. Now, Farming Frenzy was a very good relic for players, but there's not really good places to get low-level herb seeds. Now, yes, I know you're able to get Guam, Tarman, Marentel from the Fet zombies, but there's a little bit of an issue with that. Those are low-level seeds. To get the high-level ones, you have to kill Kalphite King, Solak, Moss Golems, which are very, very locked into the end game, and by the time you're there, I mean, your Herblore is already making overloads. And then, let's say, for example, for all of the combat diversity, they should have done this what they wanted to all the way back into, I believe, about 2019, once they wanted to upgrade all the weapons. This would have been the most perfect time. For example, remember back when two-handed swords, they gave you 10% critical damage, but you were able to take 10% damage due to that fact. And then stuff like spears, where your bleeds were able to last 50% longer, they could have done something like your bleeds last double. Now, if you're using dual wield, your weapon should have had a chance to skip a global cooldown, or just like the Bandos War Priest armor set, where it has a, I believe it's what, 17% chance of resetting your ability cooldown. This would have been amazing for dual wield. Now for range, this one, those combat diversity betas, this was actually very interesting, and I really wish they do bring this in the game. Now, range is very known for being a far casting style, and a good wraparound this would have to be, let's say, too far relic. And this is that every tile that you're away from your boss, you'll deal 1, 3, 5, 7% less damage. So this forces rangers from being a safe distance away all the way close up and personal if you want to deal, let's say, 10% more damage. This would have been beautiful. Now, yes, you could have done this with magic as well. Now, with all that, thank you all so much for pretty much listening to my RS talk on all the improvements. It was pretty much a good amount of 20 improvements that they could have done before leagues. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day.